So I immigrated in 2004 towards the end in September of 2004. And why I moved was basically because my family was moving and I didn't really have a choice but to come with them. And my immigration experience was pretty difficult actually because I went into high school and I went into a year where everybody was like almost graduating, and high school is not necessarily the friendliest place. So I had a pretty rough time when I first came to Canada, and I really, really hated it and really wanted to go back for about a year and a half. And then I was okay. Like once I was sort of towards the end of grade 12, I was like, okay, well, moving on. So well, we lived in the Middle East. My dad had been there for like over 20 years before that, and they like the way the Middle East is, it can never really be like a permanent place that you can call your home. Like you're kind of at your employer kind of has say in like whether you're there or not, and if you decide to leave your job, like your stay there is dependent on that. So it was never like a permanent thing. So I think that was always like playing on their minds too. And then also my sister's actually Down syndrome, and so there was very very little opportunity for her there, and everything like all the provisions that were there were in Arabic, and obviously like our family doesn't speak Arabic, we don't communicate in Arabic at all, and so it was just as she was growing older, like we realized that we really needed to move to like actually give her opportunities to be herself and develop. So that was actually probably the main reason. Well, to be honest, I didn't like I personally didn't go looking for anything because I kind of went into like a school environment. So I don't know that I necessarily looked to government for any sort of assistance. I mean, there was nothing that we didn't ask for that just was there like welcome kind of thing, apart from the immigration check at the airport, which was pretty harrowing. But apart from that, there wasn't really anything. And like I mentioned before, my sister has Down syndrome, and so for that, like there's been a lot of governmental like assistance, and like and in that sense, like I think um like it's Canada's really welcomed us in that sense because she really has like had a chance to develop. And so when I see her, like it's just like okay, like that's kind of what this system is really good for, like helping people integrate. And maybe I didn't have the same experience, but I was able to adjust, whereas for her it would have been a lot more difficult to adjust without that help and without that assistance. So I mean it's give and take. I don't yeah. It was a number of things. I think it was also like 16 is kind of it's a very difficult age to move, and especially when you've lived somewhere your entire life and you know that in like not very many people go to university in the Middle East. Like typically people leave for, the US or Canada or the UK or Australia. And so you know that you're going to be leaving in a year and a half, 2 years anyway. And so then to have to leave before, like I think just I was kind of bitter about like I didn't want to move at all. Like I didn't see the reason for me personally. Um, but I think as soon as I realized like how much opportunity there is and like how much I can do, I really started appreciating it more. Like that took me a year and a half, 2 years, but really like the freedom that I have kind of not to do things of like my own interest and even like extracurricular things, and just like a simple thing like volunteering. Those aren't things that are typically done like those aren't things that are natural in other parts of like in the Middle East, like where I grew up. Like I didn't grow up, doing a lot of volunteer work, but when I came, I was like, oh, this is a really good way to do things. And then I really got interested in like volunteer work and social work and those sorts of things. So I think it's given me a really good platform, and now I don't feel that way because like I said, like every country has its good and its bad things. Like I'm pointing out all these differences with the Middle East, but I had the most like amazing childhood that I wouldn't trade. So I think it's all give and take. And so once I started realizing how much I can appreciate about this country, like my perception really shifted. Yeah, I do, and it's been 5 years now, which in sort of the grand scheme of things isn't a long, long time, but it is. I think it is long enough to feel like you belong, and I think living at university has made a significant difference because you kind of have to start by yourself and create your own relationships, create your own impressions of people, as well as sort of see what people think about you, and you find your own feet to a large extent when you're in university. And so I think that's been a big thing. Like while I was in high school, I felt really unsettled, and kind of for the whole 2 years I didn't really have any attachment to the place. But the 1.5 years and now, but 3.5 years into university, like it's really, I do feel like I belong. Like obviously I still feel like I can't say that I don't feel like I'm an Indian. Like if someone asks me, where are you from, I always say, oh, like I'm from India and I'm from Canada as well. So I do say that, but so I do have kind of an allegiance to both countries, but I do definitely feel like I belong. And I think, like I said, like once you realize like what you can do in a certain place and what you can give back and in whatever way that you can, then that's where you kind of find your feet in a country. And then, I mean, some of the costs, there are costs. I mean, the snow is definitely like a big cost. And then also just culturally, like there are times when you sacrifice your own culture. Like although like I am Indian and I'm very Indian in a lot of my ways as well. And there is like a basic Canadian culture that everyone ascribes to in the public sphere. And I don't think that's deniable, and I don't think you can really look past that. Like, and I don't think, and maybe it's not even necessarily a bad thing, because if you have people from all over the world coming and you need something to bind them together, it has to be the local culture, and you're coming to this place. So one thing that I do find in Canada is like people are very individualistic, and that's just again like that is a cultural thing, but that was probably one of the things that took me the longest time to adjust to and not to realize. And initially to me it was always like, why are you so selfish? Like that was the perception. But as I've grown in this society, I've realized that I've become more like that as well. And it's like it isn't a bad thing, it is just a very different way of being. But because I was brought up in a very like Eastern culture where just typically you're are surrounded by a lot of people at all times, and you like my parents have always said, like you should always put other people before yourself, which is completely opposite to the way that people think here. It's always like, okay, like this is what you need to get done, get yourself, like don't not help other people, but get what you need to get done. And to a large extent, like to me sometimes, like even just with friends and things, like I would go like out of my way to an extent that other people may not, and that was something that would always strike me, and I'd be like, why are you so selfish? Like and but that's something that I've learned, that it's just a cultural difference. And again, as I said, I don't really perceive it as a negative thing anymore, but I did initially. I think I don't think it's a very like it is difficult, but I think I was lucky that I had an international education before I came. So although I am Indian, I never lived in India, so I wasn't so steeped in the culture that when I came here, I didn't know what to expect. And so when I came here, like I knew what to expect, and I've always like I've grown up being Indian at home, and then when I went to school I was British, and then when I went to I was surrounded by like an Arab culture. So I've been used to like juggling cultures at all time, and so it's kind of the same for me here. But now like I mean, when you talk to me within 5 minutes, you'll know that I'm Indian, and that you'll know that I like listen to Bollywood music, and you'll know that I'm like, and I am. And then if I go to India, people say like, oh, you're so Canadian, because I talk about things that I do in Canada in the same way. And so I think it's just like I know that that's something that a lot of people have, like that is a really big thing for people to deal with, is their culture. But I think like I guess to an extent I feel lucky that I had not only the language and the accent almost when I came, and then now like my accent's a little bit strange. It kind of changes depending on who I'm speaking to, and it's not something I do consciously. It's just because I've grown up doing that. Like I've grown up having a British accent at school and an Indian accent at home, and that sounds bizarre to people, but it's just the way that I've always done things. And so to me, it was kind of natural. It's just like, oh, here's one more culture to like add into this. So I think the only like one big difference is that when you're in the Middle East, you're not assimilated into Arab culture. You are an expatriate in the Middle East. So like our family friends were all Indian. Like you were in that Indian community, just planted in a different part of the world. Whereas I feel when you come to Canada, you're assimilated into the culture a lot more, and so it steeps much more into your like day-to-day dealings. Like I lived in the Middle East for 16 and a half years, but I couldn't conduct a conversation with you in Arabic. Like that's pretty shameful, but it's true because I never needed to. So, I think that's like one big difference. So my immediate future plans don't involve staying in Canada, but I do intend on coming back. Um, I want to work with like education equality, and that's kind of what I've been looking to. And I know you like look at that too. But so I'm going to India for 2 years to work with this program called Teach for India, and I'll be teaching in a low-income private or government school. Like I find out when I get there, and it's a fellowship, so I'll be training for 6 weeks and then working for 2 years there. And then after that, I want to come back and do law in Canada.